What is this? A downgraded Metallica rift? Who knows? All right, we are the Out of Bounds Show. 105.9 The Zone ESPN. We're driven by all the Mack Hike Auto Group dealerships in the Jackson metro area. This is ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Show is also driven by your next toolbox, spray and bed liner, lift kit, tires, and wheels, powered by Rick's Pro Truck. And their 3 locations in Madison and Flowood and Pearl. ricksprotruck.com. We welcome in Tom Luginbill, National College Football Analyst with ESPN. He was in Charlotte, and he joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. That Clemson SMU game, Luke's, was one hell of a football game, man.
Well, it was, and to be honest with you, SMU saved themselves, right? The thing about that game, and it was interesting because I was asked before on some of the preview shows we were doing, well, what do I need to see from both teams? And for Clemson, it was get off the field on third down, which they had not been able to do the last 2 to 3 weeks. And on offense, and for SMU, it was don't beat yourselves. Because SMU all year long had played such clean football, and then all of a sudden on that night, they go out and they completely throw up all over themselves, right? But then to show the maturity and the ability to weather the storm and bounce back, I mean, that thing could have got really, really out of hand.
Sure.
And to watch the last portion of that fourth quarter and see what that team did, because that's how that team has played all year long, without having the first quarter that they've had. And I think people, for the first time who hadn't been paying attention, saw Kevin Jennings is pretty damn good. And the throws he made on that last drive,
unreal,
smokes, unbelievable. So really, you've got to credit SMU for saving themselves, because if that thing gets out of hand, I really truly believe Alabama's in the playoff. And because it didn't, and because the game played out the way that it did, very, very impressive by SMU.
No, I'm impressed that they made the jump. They committed. Lashley and the crew have done what they need to do. They've got players all around them. It's just, when you and I were growing up, Lugs, see, Bobby Collins left here, Southern Miss, to go out there.
Yeah.
Okay. And Reggie Collier and Southern Miss were unbelievable. Lewis Lips. I mean, they went through NFL players. They had the model in the 70s and 80s. They just, they recruited a bunch of tough-ass kids from Mississippi and Louisiana and Alabama and Florida Panhandle that were overlooked, and they won and won and won. And Bobby Collins took that job and just got railroaded. He walked in. The model was already in place where they were, paying players at the level they were, and the whole, Eric Dickerson and so on deal. And then, as you and I know, then they went away. I mean, once they came down the death penalty, it was done. And to see – there were a couple of moments where we thought they may have the spark back at SMU. And by damn, Lashley goes in there, and I guess they probably have alignment, like you mentioned, with Georgia Tech and some of these other, the Ole Miss has it. And they have the alignment, and boom, I give them credit, man. They got good-looking athletes, and they can play some football.
Yeah, they can. And listen, let's not forget, this was a team that Rhett Leslie arrived there that had players on offense. They just couldn't play defense. And he knew they had to come up with some ways of closing that gap. And when you look at SMU's two deep and you look at who they're playing with, they're all former 4- and 5-star guys up front on both sides of the ball from Power 4 programs. But they're not just guys that were recruited heavily and then didn't play and they decided to transfer. A lot of them were guys that played at the previous place. So there was a sample size already of production. And that's where they made the greatest gains. So now you add a defense to what they're capable of offensively. And, you talk about alignment. That school, I call them the walk-on with rich parents. Because as people know, they're paying their own way. And in doing so, that school raised $160 million in 1 year to start funding their collective and name, image, and likeness to go forward. They are primed to go down a path where they can compete with anybody because they have the financial resources. So don't be surprised if this is just the start of something special there, because let's not forget this either. in the Dallas Metroplex area, within a 100-mile radius in any direction, you're going to have elite-level players. And
Right.
some of those guys are going to decide to go somewhere else. And then guess what happens when they decide they want to leave? Where are they going to go? They're going to go back home, and they're going to go to SMU because SMU's got money.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. I've had friends go there over the years, and yeah, I thought you framed it up well. Tom Luginbill with ESPN. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. You know what? Kirby Smart somehow can pull this off, Luke's. I know you know him. I know they went away at time. They only played a couple of games they were real engaged in, and they can kind of do that. But they did what they needed to do this past weekend, and I give them credit with Carson Beck going out and Gunnar Stockton, doing what he needed to do and whatever.
Sure.
But Kirby has I think it's because he's a former, and you are too, a former coach's son who overachieved and was able to play at Georgia in the 90s, even though he doesn't look like a D1 athlete and player. And so
Right.
he's always got a chip on his shoulder, even though he's at Georgia. And there are just enough times where he can infuse that into his team and tell them nobody believes in you, and they buy it, Luke's. And
They do buy it. Because what they've been able to do is he's been able to create public doubt in the value of their program when they've lost a game, right? And then utilize it with his team with the old guys. Nobody thinks we're any good. Like, everybody's talking down on us, right? And then all of a sudden the competitive juices start flowing. And it's like, oh, really? Nobody thinks we're any good, huh? Okay. All right. And to be honest with you, at the end of the day, when you watched that game the other night, did you not get the sense that you were watching a national championship game?
yeah, yes,
I mean, that's what it felt like.
two heavyweights.
And obviously, Gunnar Stockton. Yeah, two heavyweights. And Gunnar Stockton just came in and just did a phenomenal job. Obviously, that kid was very well prepared, well coached, but give that kid credit for being prepared to play in that moment. But I just think that Kirby knows that when they've played sloppy football, it's been uncharacteristic to their nature, and it's the reason why they're in the position they're in right now. But he also knows that if they don't, it's hard for anybody to beat them.
Right. Well, line of scrimmage wise, the other night, Texas and Georgia. Holy smokes, Luke. I mean,
oh, I know, right?
That's
just different. That's different football.
So while we may not get the third, and I'm okay with it. I mean, they do this in the NFL sometimes. Sometimes the Ravens and Steelers play 3 times. They're just damn good franchises and football teams, and they may face each other for a third time in the playoffs. But they may not make it, but they may. Talk about how valuable it is for Georgia to get the bye.
Well, I think a lot of that depends on, I'm going to use Georgia here, and then I'm going to use Arizona State as the other example. I think a lot of that depends on how healthy are you, all right? Where do you need rest? Clearly, that's a question that has to be asked with Carson Beck. We know that, all right? So you love to have that extra time there. And then if you have to prepare the other guy with 2 weeks instead of one, I think I don't know if you can put a price tag on that for their particular situation. Conversely, I would almost say the exact opposite about Arizona State. Arizona State is so flaming red hot right now that if they could play tomorrow, they would. And I think sometimes when you get that bye and you're peaking at such a high level, the bye could work against you. Now, that doesn't mean that Arizona State doesn't need rest and that they're not banged up because they don't have anywhere near the depth that Georgia does. But like if I'm Kenny Dillingham, I wish I was playing this week. I'm obviously tickled to death to have a bye and to earn the number 4 seed, but those are kind of two different trajectories with those teams as it relates to.
Yeah. SEC Coach of the Year, Tom Luginbill. We were talking about it earlier. You got Shane Beamer. You got Clark Lee. We call him Clark Lee Motors. And then you got Billy Napier.
Yeah.
So if you just could vote for one, or maybe somebody else, but who would you go with?
Billy Napier.
Okay.
I think that with that dark cloud that just continually looms over Gainesville and the toxicity of the fan base that You can't ever please them. You can't ever do enough. The sky's always falling. It's just nothing but negativity all of the time. Everybody talked about their schedule going into the season, and deservedly so. So you've got that. Then you find yourself in a position where you lose by almost 4 touchdowns in the opener versus Miami. Now suddenly you have quarterback injuries and quarterback problems. You're trying to get a true freshman ready. You weren't playing good defense early. And at every turn through the first half of the season, that team could have completely folded on Billy Napier. And the reason why he's the coach of the year is somehow it didn't. And you have to give him credit for. I don't know what he's preaching. I don't know what it is they're putting together in terms of an infrastructure there. But there is clearly, no matter what the negativity or the outside clutter is surrounding that team, he has insulated that team, and the team believes in what the message is. And I think that is extremely, extremely difficult to do. And it's going to be interesting because when you look at that roster and now who's coming back, and you look at guys like Jaden Baugh, true freshman, DJ Lagway, true freshman, that defensive front really started to get after it the back half of the season. I thought he just did a phenomenal coaching job.
Yeah, look, Ron Roberts hiring a grizzled veteran who they had that toughness component on the defensive side of the football that they needed. And you know this. I mean, it sounds simple. They were more physical up front, started tackling better as the year went on. And I think that's a credit to a veteran like Ron Roberts and what he was able to do for Napier and that team. All right, Tom Luginbill on the Out of Bounds show. Lugs, let's go to. Do you believe that here's a text? Do you believe that Georgia? You mentioned Connor Stockton. He had an unbelievable high school career.
Gunnar Stockton.
Gunnar Stockton. Yep. And what a great football name.
I know.
Do you believe if Carson Beck is out and has to have surgery, which it sure looks like, it looked bad, do you believe that he can be good enough to drive them to the national championship game?
Yeah, if Cardell Jones at Ohio State can be, he can be. And the reason why is he doesn't have to do it by himself, right? They've got a defense. They've got really good players around him. Clearly, he's got some intangible traits that now the whole world knows that he has. And on top of it, let's not forget, there's no film of him to study at the college level except for those, 3.5 quarters?
Mm-hmm.
So nobody really knows yet, okay, well, where are his deficiencies? What do we maybe want to force him into? What can we not allow him to do that we think could be a problem against us? Those things are all very, very real, in my opinion. So, yeah, I think he can. And listen, everybody loves the number 2, right? And you come in, you have the opportunity, you play well, now everybody thinks you're the saver. It's an entirely different animal when you start prepping and you are now the 1 and it is all on you. And now the entire perspective is different.
All right. Tom Luginbill with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show. Gunnar Stockton, backup QB for Georgia, now may be the starter, and they get a bye, get another week to work with him, and maybe if Beck is out, he'll know he's the guy for a couple of weeks now. Bill Belichick to North Carolina. Let's say this happens. You started at quarterback in Power 5. You've also been in pro ball. You coached. Now you've been an analyst for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I think John Summerall is a hell of a coach. And I think I would lean towards John Summerall, even though I know that Bill Belichick is a freak and a savant. Do you believe that Bill could make the transition, bring in Steve Belichick, and make the transition where you don't have as much time to work with the players, and you probably can't ride your coaches quite as much, and figure out the whole NIL thing and get UNC Chapel Hill? They've got plenty of money. It should matter if they want to do it. Get them motivated to give, blah, blah. I mean, do you think this could all align and Bill Belichick could become we already know he's a great coach, but a good college football coach, Tom Luginbill?
Listen, I think the problem with the discussion of this is none of it's going to revolve around X's and O's, football IQ, football intelligence, all of this and that. It all revolves around the current landscape of college football and whether or not North Carolina is truly committed to compete at the highest level when it comes to name, image, and likeness and the collective and the resources that have to be devoted to football if you want to be elite. To me, North Carolina is UCLA of the East Coast. They talk a big game, and they'll put a little bit in, but they really don't want to commit fully because they've proven that they haven't. And you would be asking somebody who I think is going to be 73 years old to come in and have to do a job where 80 to 85% of it now is no longer about football. He's a football guy, right? Now it's about all this other nonsense. And I don't know why in the world he'd even have any interest in it. That's first and foremost. And whether he could succeed or not, nobody knows the answer to that question. And when was the last time Bill Belichick's been involved in college football? And whenever the last time it was, it certainly isn't what the game is today. My inclination is that this has been a move that's been over-publicized by the institution and the university to send a message out publicly that, oh, we're really serious, right? These are the types of people, and this is the level of person that we're talking to for this job. I don't know how real that is, but I feel like it's a little bit more propaganda than anything else.
Okay. And if you were making the hire, it sounds like, and you're the AD, you would go with John Summerall over Bill Belichick, not because, like you said, of football wisdom and smarts and intellect, but because of what you just laid out.
Yeah, it's hard, man. I mean, it's really, really hard. And the other thing too is the energy that you would need to have to do this and succeed. And I hate to, it's becoming a young man's game. That's the reality of the situation.
What did you make of, and you can tell me if you want to pass, but these are interesting, very, very interesting topics and things going on in the world of college football. Mike Gundy is one hell of a football coach. I know he's crazy as a road lizard, okay? But he is, 18 straight winning seasons in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and he does what he wants and so on. And the Board of Regents called him on the mat, or called his bluff, so to speak, and said, you saw it all. Hey, we're restructuring your contract. You're going to make more changes, or we're going to try to fire him with calls. Not sure that would have worked out. $25 million left on his contract. Looks like they got the deal done over the weekend. He hires Todd Grantham, who is a solid plus DC, and we'll see what else he does. What did you make of that? Do you think it's time for Mike to head to the beach, or did you look at it and say, hey, the stockholders and the board of directors and the board of regents are allowed to do this? Or what was your initial reaction when you read the story of how this was unfolding with Gundy in Oklahoma State?
That every tenure runs its course, and when you start seeing some cracks, then it generally is not going to end well. Doesn't mean it's going to end abruptly, right? Which it could have this week, but down the stretch, there's going to come a point where Mike Gundy's going to go, I've had enough of this, right? This isn't what any of us signed on for. I've worked tirelessly for this university, this community, this town. We've won a lot of football games here. If you're not happy with me, fine. Maybe it's time for me to go on and do something else. But I think this is more of a result of time and tenure. It's hard to do what he's done for as long as he's done it, particularly over the last 10 years. That's when it's really, really, really gotten tough, because just imagine if you had the name, image, and likeness era occur at the same time on the same plateau as T. Boone Pickens
passes away,
alive and at the height of what he was doing to transform that university.
Right.
And they don't have that right now. Right. And so I just think that over the course of time, it runs its course. Okay.
There's the bowl debate, Tom Luginbill, and again, you started Power 5 quarterback. You got to see things. You've covered all. You've called a bunch of bowl games outside the college football playoff. So there's a cool factor for a 21-year-old to go to a town for 4 or 5 nights and everything's paid for, and you get all right. You get all the hotels and all the cool food, all the amazing food, and wherever you go, they plan different things for you. Where do you think we're going? I mean, we know that you'll have 20, 30% plus opt-outs on rosters, but you'll still have many starters, but others will have to play. You'll still have a core group that decides, yeah, I want to go to Jacksonville. I want to go to Tampa. I want to go to Las Vegas. I want to go to Houston. You know, where do you stand right now with kind of what is this morphing into as far as the bowls? I've got a couple of minutes.
In terms of like recruiting, or
I think interest from the coaching staffs, knowing that they're in the portal right now for the next 2 weeks. Interest from players. I don't want to hammer all the players who opt out. Some of them have every right, and that's a good business decision. Some don't. I mean, just kind of where do you see the value here, and where this is going?
Well, where it's going is we eventually have to get to a point where there is a collective bargaining agreement that requires players to fulfill their agreements, right? Fulfill their obligations, which would include playing in every game that you are eligible to play for, which would mean no more opt-outs. That's where we've got to get to. And I think eventually we will get there. There's just going to have an agreement by both parties that, hey, this is, we're coaching in the game, you're playing in the game. This is what we do. We play football, we coach football games, we play football games. Deion Sanders said it best a couple of weeks ago in relationship when he was asked if people would opt out of the bowl game. And he got pretty fired up, and I love that. I applaud that. But until we get that fix, then it's everybody for themselves, and that's the problem. That's what we've created in this sport. It's not, big team, little me. It's the opposite. And so now it's all about money. It's all about circumstance. It's all about where am I at? Where can I go? It's not about what do I need to do right now for the team that I'm playing for? And, some people may say, oh, that's a get off my lawn mentality. Okay, that's fine. But if you asked me when I was a kid, if I said, I'm not going to play in a bowl game, I'd be like, what? What do you mean you're not going to play in a bowl game?
Right.
Like that is completely out of left field to me. I can't comprehend that. So until we get a hold on players having to fulfill obligations, then we're going to continue to see more and more and more of this.
All right, man. We appreciate you, and we'll figure out what we're going to do over the holidays. But I thought it was an unbelievable regular season and conference championship weekend. So I'm still super excited about the sport, and I know there's a lot of changes, but it's still a hell of a lot of fun to watch,
Absolutely.
So have a good week, man. Be good.
All right, buddy. You too. See you.
Tom Luginbill, national college football analyst with ESPN. On the Out of Bounds Show, brought to you by The Armory. For all your firearms at The Armory, suppressors at The Armory, and optics at The Armory. Lake Harbor in Ridgeland, right in front of Kroger. The Armory, Lake Harbor in Ridgeland. Firearms, suppressors, optics, powered by The Armory, Lake Harbor in Ridgeland, right in front of Kroger. We're 105.9 The Zone ESPN. There's some Penn State trash talk on my Twitter feed, and Mississippi State fans are coming in hot.